Welcome to the Cycling in Alignment podcast, an examination of cycling as a practice and dialogue about the integration of sport in right relationship to your life.
Greetings, space monkeys. Did you know that you can go to my website, colbypierce.com, and book an integrative bicycle fitting? What is an integrative bicycle fitting, you ask? And why didn't you just call it a bike fit, Pierce? Well, allow me to explain. An integrative bicycle fitting is a unique product that achieves a high level of client understanding through examination of holistic movement patterns and systems throughout the body, including muscular, fascial, visceral, neurological, lymphatic, circulatory, respiratory, and limbic systems. These are understood in the context of how the dream, goal, or objective aligns life for the client's choices and habits. The environment, psyche, and drive will result in the current expression of athletic ability. This product was created to serve riders who have not found satisfactory results from conventional fitting methods. By taking time to understand an athlete on a level with more depth, we allow space for change in trajectory, which can bring about healing. Orthodox or conventional bike fitting looks at a rider through a biomechanical lens, understanding the athlete as a system of levers that applies power to the pedals and nothing more. Ostensibly, when the relationship of these levers is optimized, the rider will perform to their potential. If a rider's challenges fall outside the scope of this model, often the problems will go unresolved. By attempting to solve all problems with only biomechanical tools, we are limiting the choices we have to bring the athlete to a higher state of health. We must expand our toolbox and widen the scope of our methods in order to serve the client more completely. Cycling is a battleground which will test you on every level if you go far enough. It will break you down to your nucleus and give you the opportunity to build yourself back up again. It can provide the landscape for your own hero's journey. The integrative bicycle fitting is designed to assist you in this process. A session will take about 6.5 hours and have 4 phases. Phase 1 is observation. We meet at the Fit Studio and go for a ride of about an hour. During this ride, I will take video footage of you in the real world. Then we will return to the shop for a comprehensive holistic movement assessment and more video taken indoors. Phase 2 is discussion, education, and mapping. In this phase, we discuss what we learned from our video footage, and I educate you about your current movement patterns. Then we decide the course of action and discuss recommendations. In the third phase, known as change, we take initial bicycle measurements and we begin to make changes in the contact points of the bike. We also do an off-the-bike movement review, instruction of essential movement practices, cycling technique, and posture on the bike. The final phase, integration, involves the completion of the fit process in which I take final bicycle measurements and we have closing discussion. If you want to read more about my integrative fitting sessions, please visit colbypierce.com, click on services, and then you'll find the link to integrative bicycle fitting. You'll also see a link to my scheduling calendar there. Thank you for listening, and please remember to always think critically, act intuitively, and pedal consciously.
We just sort of connected as humans and saw each other. And I think if we can have more of that, that's a start. It's not going to be the be all end all. It's not going to solve all of our world problems. But I do believe that with the right effort, we can find a way to heal and come back together like Kintsugi. It's, we're on a quest to form a more perfect union. So in that, there are flaws and there's imperfections, and we work with those.
Mm-hmm. That makes me think of, I'm actually searching it here, the Ho'oponopono prayer.
Yeah.
Did I say that right? I might have butchered that.
No, you got it. Like, yeah. And so, yeah, I have that actually, that prayer on my app. So as a meditation, like around like forgiveness, and yeah, I think we can all learn a lot about how to forgive as a way to find a way to heal. There can be a lot that goes into the glue. Each of our glue, we each have some glue, right? And so each glue might be a little bit different, like what the ingredients are, but I think we can all find the glue to find a way to heal our pottery, heal what divides us. And I think forgiveness is a powerful ingredient to make that glue sticky enough that it brings the pieces back together.
And then cover that glue with maybe a layer of gold.
Yeah. And then celebrate, like, hey folks, look what we went through. Like, these things are happening all the time where we have some crack and we give up on it. We throw it away. Like, this broke, like, or just our material possessions, like the stuff that we have in the house. Like, this broke, throw it in the trash, gonna buy a new one. And if we can be a little bit more handy, we might be able to fix it, right? There's like, how many bike parts do we like, it's old, can't fix it, throw it out. But there's, every town has that old grandfather who's like, knows how to like fix everything. And you go to their shop and it's like, it's totally disorganized. It's probably hasn't been like dusted and for 35 years. He might be cranky or whatever. Man, he knows how to like fix a bike and work those parts. And he finds a way to like, put things back together, as opposed to just how we throw things out in our culture so easily. And we do that with relationships a lot.
Yep. And I mean, this is a great topic because there's so much polarity and tension in this. But before I get on that, I want to just, if I may, read this Ho'oponopono prayer. So it's a Hawaiian prayer that's about forgiveness, as you mentioned. And there are 4 phrases you can repeat in any order, according to this article I found. First, I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. So that's a pretty powerful collection of words there, if we let that sink, right? And it's sort of, I thought of this actually recently. I was listening to your podcast and you did quite an account of your accident on the Rich Roll Pod, right? Is that the guy's name? And you went into great detail about it, and you talked quite a bit about kind of the outcome of the accident. And he had asked about, did the guy end up in jail who hit you? Because he was clearly negligent. He was right. He was driving 40 miles an hour in the wrong lane and hit
with
you
a revoked license. Yeah. Right.
But as you kind of told the story, you said, I was on indigenous lands and the court system's a little different there, and nothing really ever came of it. And for many years, it sounds like you held on to quite a bit of anger towards this guy, which is very understandable. And so again, when we come back to our analogy of Kintsugi, it's like we look at our own fractured bowl, our own fractured vessel, whatever that is, and we're angry. Maybe we're angry, maybe we're upset, maybe we're sad, whatever the injury was. If it was an injury that was directly attributable to another person, as was your case, especially someone who is negligent, or maybe even worse, intentionally violent towards someone else, or whether it was just life. I got COVID and now I have long COVID symptoms, or I have cancer, or I have whatever. There's a million examples. And that moment is often one of, well, I'm innocent and I've been wronged, I've been harmed. But this prayer suggests and frames things in a different way. It's that in the act of living life, even unintentionally, we often do harm to others, even with the best intentions. And it's just a degree of magnitude frequently. I mean, you bump into someone in the grocery store. And, oh, I'm sorry. It's a little thing. Excuse me. Pardon me. I'm sorry. I accidentally took a step backwards without looking where I was going, or I went around that corner, too hot with my cart full of pasta or whatever I'm buying, organic pasta, hopefully. And so we do little things to people, but the difference between running into someone with your grocery cart, or maybe running over their foot with a grocery cart, and hitting you with an SUV at 40 miles an hour is fundamentally one of degree. But in either case, there were moments of inattention that led to unfortunate consequences. Maybe you bruised someone's toe in one instance, and maybe another, you put someone in the hospital for months and give them years of rehab, and that trajectory changes their life. So it's what I like about this prayer is it reframes well, I'm innocent and I haven't done, the ego wants to be like, I haven't done anything wrong my whole life. Of course, there's not a single person I know of that's true of, myself included. I've made mistakes and I've made poor choices. So it's recognition that we're all sort of bumping into each other in the grocery store of life. And we have to have that forgiveness towards other people. Now, I'm not excusing behavior, and nor am I condemning violent behavior. That's not where I'm going with it, right? But I think it's an interesting shift in perspective.
Absolutely. I love the imagery of the grocery store of life, that we're all bumping into each other. I think we can all appreciate that. Yeah, looking back, when I had a good day, no pain, I had good ride and things were great, I never thought about the driver at all. Like, it was like he wasn't top of mind. It was only when something was going wrong, like maybe I had a setback, or like I woke up and I was like, oh God, like some part of my body was really hurting.
Mm-hmm.
It brings the accident back, like, oh man. And so that was sort of like the process for me, the way of living, like in those early days. I got to the point, we went to Europe in 2012, and we went to Normandy and France, and then we went to Basel and Switzerland to visit some friends, and then we went to Poland, we went to Krakow, and then we had a private tour of Auschwitz by a twin Holocaust survivor named Eva Kor. She later immigrated to the U.S., and she opened a Holocaust Remembrance Museum in Terre Haute, Indiana, of all places, which I rode through the ride across the country, and we were able to go visit. Okay. And so my wife followed her. I did not follow her at the time. And she said, hey, Eva's going to be at Auschwitz while we're in Switzerland. I want to go. I'm like, okay, let's go. And we got there, and I vaguely remember learning about the Holocaust growing up. Of course, we know about it. And then once you go there, it changes you. You can feel the energy, the death all around you. And her family was sent there from Hungary, and she was separated along with her twin sister for the experiments that the Nazis did on twins. And they both survived. The rest of the family did not. And she was a controversial figure while she was living. In 2019, she passed away. But what made her a controversial figure is that she went on a forgiveness tour, basically. Mm-hmm. And she came out publicly to say, I'm forgiving the Nazis, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because I do. If I carry around like all the hatred and animus towards them, then I can't live the life I want to live. So I would call that carrying around, the way I talk about it, Colby, is like the rocks in your backpack that we put in our backpack. We just carry around with us, and we're like, we'll deal with it later. But after a while, after years, after 20 years or 30 years or 50 years of carrying all these rocks in our backpack, it gets pretty damn heavy, and it really prevents us from living the life that I think we really want to live. And so here we were, it was July. We were going to try to get into the Alps to see a stage of the tour. No shade at Auschwitz. We're sweating. Eva's rushing around in her golf cart telling us about her experience. And then someone asked her about forgiveness. And I was blown away by her answer. And on the train back from Auschwitz to Krakow, I was like, and if she can forgive them, like what is preventing me from forgiving the driver? Because I know the driver didn't wake up that day and say, hey, I'm going to get O'Brien. I'm going after our cyclists. Now, there's some evil in the world where there's some people that may think that. But a lot of the accidents that happen with automobiles or trucks and cyclists is really from a lack of attention and carelessness. Not I'm going out and getting a cyclist. They might want to go out and scare a cyclist. I think that happens. But I knew he didn't wake up that day. He was just trying to get to work, and he was late. And he cut the apex of the turn, and I was right there. For whatever reason, I was right there. If I woke up 5 minutes earlier or later, or if I was traveling 0.2 of a mile per hour faster or slower, it's a totally different accident. It may never have occurred, or I may not be here. But for whatever reason, I was right there. And it changed him too. I don't know how, but certainly hitting someone like the way he hit me, and the fact that he also had to go to the hospital because he had a whole bunch of glass in his face because I went through the windshield. That leaves a mark on him too. And when we went to the court in the Pueblo, in his town, like it was, for me, it was eye opening, just like there's just massive poverty and, struggle and pain and hurt, and it's also part of our history in this country of like they were here first, and we really haven't grappled with that. Our solution is to put up a casino, and that might not be the best solution. And so all of this, like this whole experience, like my visit with Eva and just thinking about him and his life and what may have happened after the fact, that I softened and I said, you know what, I'm going to forgive him. At minimum, because I deserve forgiveness, because I don't want to carry this around with me anymore. It's a rock in my backpack that I've been carrying around for 11 years, and it's time to let it go, because what happened happened. I can't turn back time. I can't make it go away. It happened, and amazing things have happened in my life because it happened. And that wasn't his intention, but good things have happened and some unpleasant things have happened. But, my life, that I have right now is as a result of it. So let's try to let it go. And so that's what I did for the rest of our vacation in Europe. So by the time we got back to Charles de Gaulle to fly back home, I was like, all right, we're going to let this rock be in Europe. And so the way I look at it is that rock is somewhere in Europe. I didn't have to bring it back home to the States.
Okay. Yeah, there's an idea that Paul talks about quite a bit in his teachings, which is that you hold hatred or anger or judgment against someone else in your mind, and that's the equivalent of you poison and expecting someone else to die.
Yeah.
Right.
Great way. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really what it is. You're the one having that experience of anger and hatred. You're the one carrying that, in your analogy, carrying that rock around. And maybe what Paul's saying is something a bit worse, a bit more insidious, because the rock is really, it's in your gut. It's in your system. And, in a lot of holistic circles, that would be interpreted, or it could be interpreted, that a lot of people who carry that type of hatred or anger or emotion that manifests into dis-ease, right? The old saying is, feelings buried alive never die. So we can just stuff them on down there, keep them felt but not talked about, and glaze over it whenever you can. Just veneer over it with a smile, which brings me back to one of the earliest parts of our conversation. Long ago, a family member of mine used to have a piece of paper on the wall of her home office, and it said, "Happiness is a commandment, not a suggestion." And I read that and it instantly triggered me. Just did not like that immediately. I was like, this is inauthentic. This suggests a layer of veneer to me. And I really don't like veneer. I don't like fake anything. I don't like fake wood. I don't like fake sugar. I don't like fake people who have fake tits or lips or glute implants or use steroids. I want all the wrinkles and all the gray hairs and all the authentic, like,
you want all the wabi sabi.
Yeah. That's what we
all
are.
Of it. Yeah. That's what we are.
You are.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to say that because I acknowledge that. Like, I'm in a sense of privilege. I mean, I'm not Brad Pitt, but I also wasn't born with an obvious deformity. I haven't had an accident. I haven't been burned on my face. I'll take a moment to acknowledge that. So our perspective is always shaped by our experience. But another point I want to make about, which again is parallel to your experience in the concentration camp in Auschwitz, is my daughter and I went to Hiroshima. And we went to the museum. And I've talked about this in other episodes, so I won't kick the horse, but that was powerful. And I walked out of that museum extremely somber, sad, but also moved in arguably a good way. I was thinking every human being on the earth should be required to go to this museum, because we need to understand what our own species is capable of. And we need to understand the implications of those actions. It was a moving experience to be there. I'm glad I went. It wasn't pleasant. We had to go home and watch something really goofy and stupid afterwards to kind of lighten the mood before we went to dinner. But I think we're both glad we went. It was powerful, very educational.
I think we need those experiences in life to create some tension. For those that have been to Washington, D.C. and seen the National Holocaust Museum there, or maybe have gone to Amsterdam to Anne Frank's museum, and there are others obviously across the world. But I think it is a reminder. I think we should be a student of history, a reminder of what we're capable of. And in those moments, there are a whole bunch of people that felt very justified in doing what they did. Mm-hmm. Like, this is the right thing, and just how easy it can be to create massive harm. And in hope, part of my hope is that we've gone as a planet, as a civilization, we've lived through those moments, like World War II and the Holocaust, and they serve as reminders of the horror that we can inflict upon each other, as a cautionary tale, in hopes that we'll never do that again. But we still go to war, and we still, it's so easy to want to create more violence as a response to more violence. And where does it end? It's right. I think these are moments where it does call for us to say, hey, why don't we just pause and take a breath and reflect, what do we want to do, and how will history judge us? And I think it's good to ask those questions. And again, good to be a student of history and to go into those experiences knowing that we're going to come out of it and we'll feel a lot, and we might need a really goofy movie afterwards just to change the mood.
Yeah. It brings to mind one of my sort of paradigms that I use when I reference or am coaching someone, or just in daily life. For me, the way the lens through which I view relationship is sort of a balance. We could say yin and yang, but really the polarities are love and support and challenge. And the dance is really the interplay between those two polarities. So you have a friend and you see him or her doing something that they enjoy, and you support them, you love them, you encourage them, right? You go for a ride with them, whatever you do, you go to races with them. But then you see them treating their child poorly, or cheating on their wife, or in a job that is destroying their soul. It's just mining energy, life force energy out of their soul. So then is the time, delicately at the right moment, maybe not as your friend delivered it, the timing wasn't quite right, but at the right moment, ideally,
a little too soon.
Too soon, you deliver the message, and that message is challenge. Right? It's not to say you have to be confrontational or punch them in the face. That's not what I mean. It could be the right answer at the right moment, probably not often, but ultimately you take that paradigm, that polarity, and we recognize that that exists in every relationship in our lives, in my opinion. That's the fundamental model for all relationship, right? It's like, when do you support someone, when do you send love to them, and when do you draw your boundaries, your limits? And this is also core to one of Paul's teachings, which is so essential. A man or woman who does not understand their no can never define their yes. So he's effectively saying we have to define our boundaries. We have to know where our limits are. And occasionally other people will bump into those limits in the grocery store of life. So someone runs over your foot and you say, ow, that hurt, excuse me. And you let them know that's a boundary. They run over it again. Then it's like, then maybe we need to ram them with our cart or something. I don't know. But that's the kindling. That's the spark of violence. And unfortunately, when we take that to the extreme, the outcome is war, right? It spreads over a culture. Now, there are lots of steps to get from ramming someone with a grocery cart or defending your grocery space, fighting over the toilet paper during COVID. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
All the examples come to mind versus a country going to war. Obviously there's scale, but there's also then indoctrination and brainwashing. There are conversations around enculturation of conflict and generational conflict, which is another layer, a non-trivial layer to that outcome. And then we end up with tragic results, such as Auschwitz, Hiroshima, current warfare that's happening now in the Ukraine, for example.
Yes.
So, but, from the biggest lens, it's really fundamentally, I would offer that same dance of love and challenge. And there are people who walk the earth who polarize that in such a way where, again, maybe I'm either saying something brilliant or trivial and trite. I'll let you and the audience decide, but it's the same polarity of challenge and balance, yin and yang, and Disney paradigm, good and evil. So there are people who walk through the world with a very small circle of what they consider to be their tribe. It's tribalistic thinking on some level. And if you're not with me, you're against me. And this is a very divisive mindset. And I think we can agree, I think most people could agree, no matter what side of the fence they happen to be on, that mindset has become more polarized in the last 4 years. This is one of the side effects of the accelerant of COVID.
Yeah, the amplification and accelerant of COVID and just social media, where algorithms will, I think it's rapidly increasing our divisiveness, because those things on the edges, it's the othering, it's us versus them.
Yes.
Taking advantage of our natural biology of like friend or foe, to your point, Colby, the tribalism. Am I safe around these people? These people are out to get me. And if we have a finite or scarcity view of the world, there's only so much to go around. The them, not us, might take what's rightfully ours. So, if you hear these messages on repeat frequently enough, you start to really believe them. It takes the ability to like break that groove, get out of that rut, interrupt the pattern, however you want to look at it, to say, okay, well, how true is that? And I think for a lot of folks, you've traveled a lot in your life. Like when we travel, we go to other countries, we realize like at the end of the day, like we all want to have a good life. We want our kids to be good if we have good, we want them to be healthy if we have children, but we want to have a good life, and we can be there for other people. And, like I just said, like, I've had the luxury of traveling to a lot of really cool places all around the world. And I didn't have that experience growing up. I basically just like spent my time in upstate New York and maybe into Maine or New Hampshire or Massachusetts, but I didn't really go far. And so I became a professional out of college. And my wife, though, was a huge traveler. when we got married, I had to get my passport and she had to add pages to hers.
Yeah.
And, like, so in her travels, and she traveled like all over, of course, with that many stamps in her passport, you learn that, generally people are good, but there's a lot of hurt. And there's a quote I love, and I don't necessarily know who to attribute it to, but the quote is, anger is when pain makes a public appearance.
Mm.
And so if we have this pain inside, this poison, this rock inside,
Mm-hmm.
if the conditions are right, it comes out as anger. And we see that anger. We've seen it happen in this country. We see it happening in the rest of the world. There's a hurt there, because we're using some of these accelerants, these things that amplify things to like make the hurt more hurtful.
Yep.
And we're not taking the necessary steps to get out of our groove and be like, you know what? Hey, there's a better way. We can double down on love, which sounds soft, but love is hard, man. That's a hard thing to do. Like, it's not soft and mushy and all goo goo and all that kind of stuff. There's an aspect of love that's like that, but like, loving someone, especially loving someone that you don't really know, just giving that love to someone, it's hard, but that's what I think that's what's required in order for us to heal. And if we don't heal, then we'll keep downloading our pain onto other people.
Yes. Hurt people.
Yeah. And heal people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I find myself in the minority mindset. I think I've started to have some clarity on this. I talked about this on previous podcast episodes, but my first remembered experience of being sort of not a member of the tribe was going to an all-school assembly sometime in probably grade school. And they used to, shuttle you into the gym and show you a bunch of videos on stuff. And I remember a couple of them were about how brand name jeans were just more expensive and things like that, kind of good-natured brainwashing, we'll say. And one of them, at some point or another, we saw like this video of this puppy or kitten or something adorably cute. And the entire assembly, all the kids were in the gym, so a couple hundred kids, I don't know. And they all made the cute puppy noise, the oh, everyone in the gym except me. And I'm not sure why at that moment, at that young age, I wasn't influenced by that tribal, let's all join in and make this noise and agree that this puppy's cute. Because to me, my dad was an astrogeophysicist, so I was probably like science mind, like, that's interesting. That puppy has a stripe on his nose. Why is it crooked? Yes. It's probably in some science analysis of the puppy. Everyone else was consumed by the cuteness. But that was the first moment where I became sort of aware, like, I'm not like necessarily like all these kids in some ways. And as I've gone into my fifth decade, I've come to realize that I think my role in the tribe, epigenetically or genetically or however you want to phrase it, is or has been in the past, something I identify with, is sort of that counterbalance to the extremely polar, like, well, that tribe wants to kill us because they're not part of our tribe. So we need to assemble the warriors and go over there and kill them before they kill us. And I was the guy who was like, hold on a second. Can you just give me 5 minutes? Let me go talk to them and see what's going on. Let me just feel it out. I was the peacemaker. I was like they've got kids too, We don't have to go steal all their meat and their bread and burn their yurts to the ground just because we can see them. There's enough buffalo for them over there. We have all these buffalo over here. Yeah, but they're going to eat our buffalo. No, they're not. Look, there's 5,000 of them. We're fine. So I was that guy. And as a result, I don't walk through the world cheering for the Denver Broncos. I don't have an affinity for sports teams that happen to be from my state, where my mom happened to move because she came from Ohio because she fell in love with the mountains. Like, I don't have any allegiance to the Broncos. I don't give a shit, or the CU football team. Like, I went to CU, but I don't care about their football team. It has nothing to do with me. Now, do I want their children to grow up and be successful and be housed and healthy and have fulfilling lives and express their dream? Yes. But no more than the children of any other football player's children.
Sure, yeah.
So again, filled with minority opinions. It's not how most people think, but it's how I've always thought. I guess the point I'm just making is I think everyone has a place in their tribe. And one of my tenets as a coach for athletes is to know thyself. And if you accept my principle that sport is really just a chessboard of training for life, it's a cauldron to make us better at life, it's not the other way around, then I would offer that when I ask you to know yourself as an athlete, what I'm really doing is know your place in your tribe and accept that there are other people in the tribe who initially you might conflict with, right? Like someone comes to me and that they've got that polarized them or us mentality, and it can be very challenging for me to accept that sometimes. But when I'm in a place where I can see that tribe from the eagle eye view, then I understand it all works together for a reason. There's a symmetry. There's a reason why our species has survived for this many generations, and I'm who I am and they're who they are. It's supposed to be that way. But then a few minutes later, I'm like, oh, this guy's driving me nuts. So I'm back in the forest. or staring at the
Kansas
tree.
City Chiefs. They're a Kansas City Chiefs fan. You know, like, and you like your allegiance to the Broncos. I love what you just shared, Colby. I think when it comes to sports, I think for me, the allegiance and the dressing up, and I actually happen to be a Broncos fan, but like my emotions are not ebbing and flowing with how well they do. You know, I like to root them on and stuff like that. But I think it comes from a sense of like people want to feel like they belong to something.
Yeah.
You know, and so sports gives them a chance to belong to something. And my feeling too is that might be really cool for them. I think what's also could be really cool and opportunity for them is to have some belonging to oneself and then belonging to maybe those around them in life, you know. And so the affiliation or the belonging of the Broncos can have a different meaning. So you're the way you look at life, the way you experience life doesn't go on some roller coaster ride and it's determined by 40 guys in brightly colored pads and helmets. You know, like you're signing over your happiness based on how those folks do.
Yes.
And I think the opportunity is like come back home, like come back to who you are, come back to the grandfather exercise that we talked about earlier. Like when you look at yourself in the mirror, do you love you? Because if you can get to that spot, like, hey, I love you, then you can be entertained by the sport, you can be entertained by the game, but your overall happiness isn't like greatly influenced by how well they do on Monday Night Football. Growing up though, like, you know, I was a pretty big organized sports fan, and so I was just like really big fan of all my teams. And yeah, I'd feel really happy when they won, and I would feel bummed out if they lost. But that pull, if you will, that connection is less so now. Like my girls would come in if I'm watching a game. They're like, "Who do you want to win?" I'm like, "I don't care. I just want to see people do their craft at a high level, you know." But ultimately, my happiness, my fulfillment in life is determined by me and how I want to show up in the world and the connections that I have with them or the people really close to me, not the 40 players plus or minus a few on the Broncos.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I'm far more likely to have connection if I'm personally involved in that outcome somehow. Otherwise, it's people, and I see them as people. Again, I can appreciate people practicing their craft, especially at the highest level, right? Whatever that is. There's some that are more interesting than others to me, of course. But like, yeah, I mean, I'll say biathlon, winter biathlon is pretty cool. You know, you watch women shooting stuff and skiing. that's pretty entertaining.
I think it's really cool. Like, watching, pro cycling, like any cycling, like it's really cool, but I'm not necessarily rooting.
Yeah. For Poggi or Van der Poel.
Yeah. Like I want a great race, and anyone that has the courage to go off on a break, which is a lot of EF, strategy. Like, I'm like, yeah, like make it happen. Like one of our license plate is called Breakaway. It's like, that's our vanity plate, Breakaway. Like, so like, yeah, go for it. Like, I'm rooting you on, but I'm looking for a good race, and I don't have a strong affiliation with one group or another. If I had a personal stake in it, like for you and some others that might, then yeah, the allegiance might be stronger, and it's a little bit different, but then that's also a different part of the community. Like, you're in it. Like, going back to the Broncos, we don't play for the Broncos. So if we played for the Broncos, we'd have it different, because that would be we would have more proximity. But as a fan, I'm just, my overall happiness in life is not determined by whether, like, whoever wins the Olympic gold road race or the Volta, or, I want Sepp to do really well, but if he does well or he doesn't do well, I'm still good.
Yeah. So that's a great perspective. 2 quick stories on that. In 2014, I worked for the sports science component of the Garmin Sharp team and or program, and I did the entire Tour de France as staff that year. No one tells you how hard the tour is. As a rider, of course, they'll tell you how hard it is, but it's really hard for staff too. It's just a brutal 3 weeks. I was pretty smoked at the end of it. And even though I was on the sports science team, you end up doing all kinds of odds and end jobs. Sometimes they just need more people to hand out bottles. It's a monkey job, but you got to get the riders water on hot days with lots of mountains, and they don't have enough Swannies or whatever. And sometimes you're just literally driving box trucks around and doing mindless work. But near the end of the race, I had a day where literally they had nothing for me to do. They were like, it was the second to last stage. And they were like, you've got nothing to do today. We've got all the feeding taken care of. The riders who are going to make it to the line are going to make it to the line. Tomorrow's the Champs-Élysées. Just hang out at the hotel and chill out. And that was the day that Ramunas won this stage. And it was bittersweet, because I worked with the team the entire tour. But that was the day where I literally didn't do a single thing. Didn't even drive a truck or hand a bottle, let alone analyze a power file or have a conversation with a rider or take a rider's weight or have sports science moments or anything, or conversation with the director or do avant course or any of the things that could meaningfully contribute to the victory. So I just sat at the hotel. And so when he won, it was like this sort of like, really? Man, I didn't get to contribute to that. So it was very bittersweet. Similarly, this winter, we have a Team EF coaching camp in Girona every December, and we have our clients come that we coach through Team EF coaching, and we teach them all the things, pace lining and sprints and tactics and drills, and we talk about mobility and nutrition and all these things. And then I stayed for a couple of days after camp and worked with some of the women, and I actually worked with Kristen Faulkner on her descending a bit.
Oh wow.
Just a tiny bit, here and there. It was great. Actually, Kristen's really fast. She's faster than she knows. Her biggest challenge, I'll tell this publicly, is that she actually doesn't quite know where her own cornering limit is. She's quite fast. We had lots of conversations about cornering, and we went down one descent in particular that I recall where the road was wet and she was hauling. And here she goes and wins 2 Olympic gold medals. Now, do I feel some connection to Kristen in that respect? I mean, I'll just, I'm aware I'm on the pod, I'm talking about it. Like, do I feel any modicum of responsibility for that medal? Not really. Like, it was all her hard work. I mean, even as a coach, when you coach someone for an entire year and then they go win a race, it's like, how much of a role did you play? You played a role. Yes. You might even say you were the conductor of the symphony, but they were the ones who played every instrument and trained every day, and they have the drive. It's their goal. You cannot give the client drive. You cannot define their goal for them. You can try. Cycling's way too hard. I can't tell someone to go win a race. They don't want to win. It'll never work in a million years. So it's just an interesting interplay of that, talking about that connection with the team and how much joy or pride or connection we have with someone who goes and wins a race, even if it's the Olympic road race. But congratulations to Kristen. Awesome work. Amazing ride. What this makes me think of is this fundamental concept that I try to offer my athletes. And I'm sure you have this concept built into your teachings as well, Michael. As you were saying, you watch your team, your girls come in and they say, "Hey, Dad, which team do you want to win?" And you say, "Oh, I'm not really too bothered about it one way or another. I just want to watch the best athletes in the world practice their craft. I want to watch the dance. I'm not attached to the outcome." And for me, that comes down to the most fundamental concept, perhaps in all meditation practices, is the practice of centering and drawing energy towards center, both physical and energetic center, and center of the various energy bodies, regardless of what system you're studying, the chakras, the energy cauldrons, whatever label we want to put on them. And that practice being so fundamental, this is how we link together so many concepts that we've talked about in this podcast. So you shatter the vessel becomes shattered through an act of violence, trauma, accident. What do? You center, you bring it back to wholeness. You center, right? You're challenged in a moment of anger. You feel anger or emotional response, whatever, fear, sadness well up inside you. When you're centered, you allow that experience authentically. You feel that feeling, but you also have the practice to not allow the volume to amplify to the point where, as you said, it doesn't dominate your whole day. You don't have one bad experience in the morning where you shatter a glass milk bottle on the kitchen floor, and then the rest of the day you're angry and you're running red lights and flipping people off, or whatever, beating yourself up like, "Oh, I'm an idiot because I dropped this," or you have 4 flat tires. Same thing. So it's about constantly reinforcing that practice of centering and remaining in that centered place. That gives us an opportunity to weather the storm of whatever may come to us throughout the day. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that word salad I just gave you.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It really, for me, like, to play it back to you, it's like coming back home, like the centering. It's one definition of mindfulness that I love is to remember. Right? Remember to come back. So when you think about, and others think about, a typical fixed awareness practice, so you fix your awareness on your breath, and your mind's going to wander, because minds wander. I think there's a Harvard study that suggests that our minds will wander 47% or 53% of the time. So for a lot of folks I work with, they might start off and say, "I can't do this thing. I can't do the meditation thing. I can't make my mind go blank." Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, that's not the point. The point is to pay attention to what's up there. We're gonna fix if we do a fixed awareness practice, we can also do an open awareness practice, but a fixed awareness practice will fix our attention on the soundscape, or maybe a sensation in the body, or the breath. Mm-hmm. And your mind will wander. That's part of the practice. It'll travel somewhere, back to middle school, yep. Or you'll wonder why Becky has great hair, or what have you, mm-hmm. and what's for dinner. And mm-hmm. and then as soon as you catch yourself wandering, you bring it back. You come back home. You come back to the breath. And that practice, that rep, if you will, the rep in the gym, of it travels away. Now we're bringing it back. That's a rep. It's like a bicep curl. And mm-hmm. then that is a practice of mindfulness to come back. Or if we happen to get in our own headspace and we're beating ourselves up, we catch ourselves and we're like, oh, I'm beating myself up. All right, come back to saying something a little bit kinder to ourselves. We come back to, it's only a spilled milk bottle, or I'm running late because of traffic. It's just simply a moment. We remember it is simply a moment, and we come back mm-hmm. to our full experience, so we don't let that bad moment turn into a bad day or longer. almost like we're not trying to prevent the wandering or prevent the emotions. Those are all part of our experience. But if we can pay attention on purpose, another definition of mindfulness, without judgment, judging the judgment, and we remember to come back. For me in my recovery, the one thing I wanted to do was just to get back home. I was tired of being in the hospital because in the hospital, it's hard to get healthy. It's hard to heal because there's so much going on. You're getting poked and pressed and measured, and it's hard to get some sleep. And all I wanted to do was come back home to familiar smells and my bed and smells of our kitchen and different tastes. And so it's that whole experience at the tail end of my initial stay in the hospital was I just want to come back home, and that felt really comforting to me. And because of insurance in America, they agreed for me to go back home. They're like, we're kicking you out. And truth be told, Colby, I left the hospital too soon. I didn't have my body to really get around smoothly around the house, but I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to get back home. I wanted to smell when my wife is a big bread maker, and as the bread's baking in the oven, you smell the yeast and you smell the bread, and there's nothing like that smell. And, that's home. And so I wanted that. And I didn't have words back then, but I felt it was going to be imperative, essential to have those senses light up, because that's how we experience life, through our senses. I wanted to feel my senses again to help me heal. And it was so helpful to get back home, even though I may not have been ready physically, but emotionally I was.
So thank you for that. Maybe you can tell people a bit more about your site and how people can find you. You've got an app called Pause, Breathe, Reflect. I'd love to hear about that. You've got your podcast. You've got a lot of other services. Tell people where they can find out more about you and dig into your work.
Yeah, they can dig in, clip in, if you will. So my website is michaelobrienshift.com. So there they can find the Kintsugi podcast. The Kintsugi podcast, like your podcast, is wherever you grab your podcast, it's there. So people can check it out. And they can also find out about the speaking I do, because I go into a lot of corporations and talk about change and community and resilience and spirit of Kintsugi and all that jazz. So a lot of companies bring me in to talk about that, to help us navigate the uncertainty of today's world and just become more resilient and deal with the stress better, which leads us to Pause, Breathe, Reflect. So the app, you can find the app at the Apple Store or Google Play. And so as a teacher, my teaching training was a 45-minute a day practice, which is great, but it's a bridge too far for most people. Most people are like 45 minutes a day. I might be able to do that every now and again, but most folks are having trouble doing 10 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And the way I recovered in my accident was around micro steps, small little doses, 1 degree of flexion, 1 degree of extension. My feeling was when I finally get back on the bike, I was like, okay, tomorrow I'm just going to ride just a little bit further, which a little bit further was like another block or a few more pedal strokes. And so this whole notion back then of small steps that you can do consistently, bite-sized pieces, but you can do them every day. And then if you string those days together, now you have a habit that becomes a way of life. And that's what I want, because I know so many people that have a yoga practice, let's say, or a meditation practice. But we'll use yoga as an example. They'll be like, yeah, I do half an hour yoga every morning. And I'm great. Like, do you take that practice off the mat and do you weave it into your day?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't. And that's not a form of judgment, but it's just more of like based on my experiences. So what I share with people is like, if you don't have 10 minutes in the morning, that's cool. A lot of people don't. You're not a bad person. It makes you a pretty active human. But
Yep.
I bet you have 5 times throughout the day where you have 2 minutes. And so do 10 minutes, 2 minutes at a time. Almost like in a match, like a football game, as we mentioned, like you call a timeout. And that timeout in sports is, we're not stopping the game. It's simply a pause in the game. The players catch their breath. And then in that moment of reflection, the coach draws up, hey, how are we going to show up once we go back on the field or the pitch? And Pause, Breathe, Reflect as an app is a whole bunch of like shorter practices to help people do that for our everyday moments, to be like, hey, I need a timeout here. Things are getting, they feel overwhelming or they're going too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel stress and I feel it in my body. And so I'm going to be like, oh, I need a moment. Pause, connect with the breath, come back home. And in that moment of reflection, you can practice a little gratitude, or you can say, okay, how do I want to show up next? And so these are little bite-sized pieces. And that's what I'm hoping to bring to the world is like, I would love it if 8 billion of us could spend a minute each day just feeling what it feels like to breathe and have a moment of reflection. I think we'd have a more peaceful, kinder world. And so we'll start there with a minute. And if a minute feels good, we'll do another minute tomorrow. And then maybe 3 weeks from now, we'll do 2 minutes. And then 6 months from now, we'll work up to 5 minutes. And then 3 years from now, someone's doing a 10-day silent retreat.
Yep.
And we don't set off and run a ultra, 100-mile ultra. We don't set off and do Leadville right off the rip. We work up to it. We run our first half mile, and then we run our first 5K and 10K and so forth and so on. So Pause, Breathe, Reflect is sort of built with that philosophy of shorter practices. And the science is now catching up with the approach that shorter practices do have a great deal of value. In fact, maybe more value because people can stick with the practice and make it a way of life.
Yeah.
And so, and we do live practices throughout the week too. So the app is wonderful. People love it. We're in a space with a lot of big names, but we're like the little engine that can, and we find our swim lane. So we have those shorter practices and then the live practices throughout the week. And then my big thing is like when you get an app, you are connected. We are connected. So they get me as their teacher to help them bring more mindfulness to their lives so they can live the life that they really want to live.
Mm-hmm. I love it. That's great. That's a really cool tool. Paul often gets the question from his clients, which exercise should I do? What are the best exercises to do? And his answer is always the ones you will do.
Yes.
Right. Which is parallel to your idea.
Just breathe for a minute. Take the perfect breath is an inhale for 5 and exhale for 5. So 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
If you just took like 6 breaths in the next minute, good. Like it's going to do your body good. It's going to do your heart good. It's going to do your mind good. It's going to give you some space to think about, all right, what's next? It interrupts the pattern. And so when we have that moment where we just spill the milk, instead of reacting and like losing our poop, we're like, it's just milk.
Just milk. It's okay.
It's just milk. Like, let's breathe, clean it up, and move on to the next moment. So that's, and so we become less reactionary. And we all know this, like in sports, in a race, the race could be, we could be flying down the mountain at 50 miles an hour, but the ones that really know how to descend well, it feels more like 30.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the race feels slower, but it's still going really wicked fast. But it just like the game feels slower and they can perform at a whole higher level. And that's what I'm trying to help people do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Help people remain that center, bring them back to center, remember center, right?
Remember to come back home. Yeah. Remember to come back home.
Yeah. Cool. Amazing. Well, so your website is Michael Obrien Shift. You've got your app in the App Store on Google and in Apple, and you've got the Kintsugi podcast, Kintsugi.
Yes.
And lots of good resources for people. So thank you so much for making the time today, Michael. Are there any parting words you'd like to bestow upon our audience?
I would say,
close it out.
I'd say breathe and keep pedaling. And much love to you, Colby, for what you do. I love your podcast. I followed you before this part of your world, and what you're putting into the world needs. So I would say to you, keep pedaling and keep on putting your good ripple into the world.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And thank you for your time and your wisdom on the show today. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's been great. And I hope the audience got a few pearls from it.
Me too. I'm sure they did. Thank you, sir. Hello there, Cycling in Alignment listeners. I'd like to take a brief moment to speak to you about the podcast. As of this recording, I'm well over 125 episodes in, and this has been a multi-year project. And I'd like to say that I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have this podcast. And I mean, I suppose just about anybody could have a podcast now. But what I have is an opportunity to really educate people about the things that I've learned and have amazing discussions with so many guests on my pod. And I've got so many more episodes planned in the future. That said, this podcast is a challenge for me. It's a challenge to put it on, to find the time, and it requires financial investment. I've got to pay for an editor. I've got to pay for equipment. I'm paying for software, paying for all the things you have to pay for when you put a podcast out into the world. And I have had financial supporters in the past. Enduro Bearings, namely, has been a great supporter. I've had other supporters as well. But moving forward, I'd like to offer a model in which my audience can show their appreciation directly. After a great amount of consideration and consternation on this topic, I've come to have a model in my mind. The model's really simple. If you have appreciation for the Cycling in Alignment podcast, if you have listened to my episodes and felt that it really has enriched your life, helped you, educated you, perhaps made you think about things from a different perspective, maybe you agreed with me on everything, maybe you agreed with me on just about nothing, but you listened anyway. I can't imagine that's the case, but I suppose it's possible. Maybe you agree with about 89% of what I say, and the other 11% of the time you think I am batshit crazy. In any case, if you would like to express your appreciation for the time, effort, and money that I put into this project, I would be grateful if you would go to my website, colbypierce.com, and click on the podcast page and offer some appreciation in the form of a financial contribution. This will help me offset the cost of this podcast. I may have other financial contributors in the future. This isn't a closed model by any means, but I do need to find a way to monetize this podcast. I've considered platforms like Patreon and others, but they seem convoluted and complicated. I don't really want to go to a paywall system. I really want to just offer content and teach, educate, discuss, philosophize, have great dialogue with the guests that I'm honored to have on my show. And to do this in the simplest way possible, I just need to push record, that is, and then you push play and get it out there. That's always been one of my methods of operation, is keep it as simple as possible and just produce the content. I don't have a goal of growing an audience. My goal is to educate people. And if I do that well, then my audience will grow as a side effect of that. So another way to offer your appreciation is to share my podcast with other people, to write reviews for me, do all the things, click the stars and make the comments. That helps because we live in a world of algorithmic preferential treatment. But if you want to move the dial for me, then please go to my website. That's colbypierce.com. Click on the page titled podcast, and there you will see some options to make a contribution that demonstrates your appreciation for what I've done. And for that, I will be grateful. There'll be a few different levels to this page, and the highest level will get you some goodies in as a thank you, including some woolly Rafa t-shirts printed with my Pierce Coaching and Fitting logo. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you in advance for anything you can do to help me spread the word. If you aren't in a position to contribute financially or don't want to, again, you can help by simply forwarding my podcast, sharing it with other people, sharing it with your friends, tell people about it on rides, spread the word, and even just send me a message and let me know if I've moved the dial for you. Send me a message and let me know if you have pertinent questions. Also, at the highest level of the podcast contribution page, you will have the opportunity to submit a personalized question for detailed analysis on an episode or a private consultation, if that's what you prefer. So that's going to be something I can offer you in return for your financial contribution to my podcast. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. I'm so grateful for my audience. I appreciate you and the opportunity you've given me. Epilogue. I want to share a few brief thoughts about the inception of Cycling in Alignment. The purpose of this podcast is for me to get 3.5 decades of hard-fought lessons out of my skull. Some of them through my own research and reading. Some of them I've been taught through mentors and colleagues, other riders, other racers. A lot of it, a massive amount of it, was simply trial and error through my own stubborn methods. And that has amassed a certain amount of experience and knowledge, understanding. And while I think I'm reasonably smart and I know quite a bit of stuff, I want to make it clear that the opinions that I share on this podcast are belief systems built on what I've experienced to this point. And that some of those opinions are pretty strong, but they are also loosely held. That is to say that if I learn more about a topic and have a greater level of clarity or understanding, then my old belief systems will be abandoned and I will now operate under that newfound knowledge. So I'm not here to tell people all the things that I know. I'm here to explain what I've learned to this point. And there's a big difference. Also, that is the intent when I discuss things on the pod with guests, is to learn from them and have a discourse. Because if we can't have a discourse as adults, then we've lost one of the basic tenets of modern society. Even if we disagree, we ought to be able to, in most cases, shake hands and walk away. Because after all, this is sport we're talking about, and while sport is training for life, it's nothing to get too upset over. The purpose of the podcast is to help me help other people, and specifically to help them actualize their highest potential by illuminating a path that enables alignment with their truth, their intent, and their coherence. That's really the end goal. So I'm grateful for your listening. My intent is also not, to be clear, to gain an audience or become popular or gain social status in any way. I don't care about that stuff. That said, if you feel an episode that you have heard will help someone you know, please share it with them. That helps us reach the end goal, which is to help more people. Thank you for listening. I'm grateful for your time and attention. Blessings.